After Jesus had mentioned natural disasters and famines, he next talked about Christian persecution. He said, "Then you'll be persecuted and arrested and killed. You'll be hated all over the world because you're my followers." So, is Christian persecution growing today? That's what we're looking at in episode 5. It's not widely reported in the West. In fact, it's been called the unreported catastrophe of our times and the greatest story never told of the 21st century. But Christians are now easily the most persecuted religious group on the planet. The International Society for Human Rights, which is a secular observatory, confirms that 80% of the world's religious discrimination is now aimed at Christians. Christians now face persecution in a staggering 139 nations, which is almost 3/4 of all the nations on earth. In a report for Civitas, Rupert Short wrote, "It is generally accepted that many faith-based groups face discrimination or persecution to some degree. A far less widely grasped fact is that Christians are targeted more than any other body of believers." He coined the term Christianophobia to describe this anti-Christian sentiment that is gradually spreading around the world. And we aren't just talking about minor persecution here either. An average of 11 Christians currently dies every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year simply because they identify with Jesus. That's a Christian dying for their faith every 6 minutes. By the time you get to the end of this video, at least one more person in the world will have been killed for their faith in Jesus. By the end of the year, 90,000 Christians will have been murdered. Probably more, in fact. The centres that gather this data aren't able to attain information for places like India and North Korea, so the real number is probably much higher. The same report incidentally says that 600 million Christians were actively prevented from following their faith in 2016. And to put all of this in perspective, that means that more Christians are suffering now than at any time in history. Indeed, more Christians died for their faith in the 20th century alone than in all the preceding centuries combined. And what's more, the 21st century is on course to be even worse. We can say with absolute certainty that Christian persecution is growing, just like Jesus said it would. Now, it's important to say that this persecution is coming from every angle. In the Middle East, for example, due to Islamic hatred, Christianity is at risk of complete extinction. There's a genocide going on there that no one currently wants to talk about. In some places like Iraq, for example, Christianity has dropped 90% in recent years due to targeted attacks.
Genocide is taking place in that area. We are ready to see the end of Christianity in a region where Christianity began.
Christianity could soon be extinct in various parts of the world because of rising anti-Christian sentiment and persecution of minority groups.
By the way, the United Nations has openly said that it's a genocide.
سادتي الأفاضل، بينما أقف هنا أمامكم اليوم الأرض في الشرق الأوسط تروى بدماء المسيحيين الذين يقتلون يوميا. هل تعلمون أنه في بداية القرن العشرين كان المسيحيون في الشرق الأوسط يشكلون 20% من السكان، أما اليوم فإن نسبتهم هي 4% فقط؟ هل تعلمون أنه خلال السنوات الماضية قتل نحو 100,000 مسيحي كل سنة؟ ولماذا؟ لا لذنب اقترفوه، فقط لكونهم يؤمنون بالمسيح. في العراق وحدها نزح أكثر من 77% في سنة 2000، بالإضافة إلى قتل وتشريد الآلاف. في سوريا عاش نحو 2,000,000 مسيحي، أما اليوم فقد وصل العدد إلى 250,000 مسيحي فقط. إن المسيحيين في تلك البلاد يعاملون كمواطنين درجة ثانية، يواجهون تمييزا عنصريا دينيا اقتصاديا واجتماعيا. لماذا كل هذا؟ فقط بسبب دينهم، ذلك الدين الذي يؤمن وينادي بالمحبة والسلام بين البشر. المسيحي في الشرق الأوسط مهمش، حقوقه مسلوبة، أملاكه مباحة، عرضه ينتهك، رجاله تقتل وأطفاله يشردون. إلى أين يذهب ومن يحميه ومن يحافظ على ممتلك؟
But it's important to note that it's not just Islam persecuting Christians. The Hindus in parts of India, especially the northeastern state of Orissa, have recently enacted some of the biggest organised massacres of Christians in the 21st century. During violent rampages, Christians have been targeted and killed and around 50,000 left homeless and destitute.
And they barged into churches and started to attack young, old men and women mercilessly. The police even barged into Christian educational institutions, and they had no mercy even on the women and children.
Buddhism is often portrayed in the West as being the very model of peace and serenity, but Christians in places like Sri Lanka and Myanmar have been targeted by Buddhists as enemies of the state. It's estimated that thousands of believers there have been jailed and killed in recent years, and around 100,000 have had to flee the country.
Back in Myanmar, Tin had to hide her Bible out of fear. Now, she, her husband and 5 children live out of a suitcase after escaping to Malaysia.
Myanmar isn't safe for us. They kill people, send people to jail because of religion. They ban our prayer. The military would come in our houses to stop prayer services. Myanmar is unsafe. We can't go back.
She's one of more than 100,000 Christian refugees from Myanmar who've recently left because of religious persecution.
Atheists also hate Christians too. Christians suffered terribly in the old Soviet bloc, of course, and even today, some of the worst persecution is happening under atheistic regimes, like in China and North Korea, for example.
Where for months the government has demolished scores of churches and torn down hundreds of crosses. Chen Jai is a respected church leader in Wenzhou. He says the faithful now live in fear. In this amateur video obtained by CNN and in the Salvation Church security camera footage, police brutally beat the faithful and drag them away.
This is just a small cross-section of what's happening in the world to emphasise that suffering is indeed now coming from all angles. Whether it be Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, atheists or others, we can clearly see Jesus' words are coming true. Hatred is growing. Indeed, many of our brothers and sisters around the world can increasingly echo the words of Paul when he said, "Our dedication to Christ makes us look like fools. Even now we go hungry and thirsty and we don't have enough clothes to keep us warm. We're often beaten and we have no home. We work wearily with our own hands to earn our living. We bless those who curse us. We are patient with those who abuse us. We appeal gently when evil things are said about us. Yet we are treated like the world's garbage, like everybody's trash, right up to the present moment." The one place on earth where Christians currently don't experience this level of persecution is the West. Here we've lived in relative comfort and freedom for centuries. But even here, this is now changing. A few years back in California, Bible studies were being closed down because government officials said it was a contravention of zoning laws. In Northern Ireland, the Christian-owned Asher's Bakery was convicted in court for refusing to bake a gay wedding cake. The same thing happened in Oregon, USA, where the owners of Sweet Cakes Bakery lost their business and were fined $135,000 for refusing to bake a wedding cake for lesbians. In England, there are now reports of Christian couples being banned from fostering children because of their beliefs. A Christian cafe owner has been banned by the police from displaying Bible verses inside his premises. Teachers have been fired for praying with pupils, as have nurses. Christian doctors have lost their jobs for talking about their faith with patients. In Canada, there's a move to criminalise people who don't go along with transgender pronouns, and that obviously includes Christians. Under this legislation, parents may also have their children taken away if they don't conform. Christian parents in general are increasingly at risk from losing their children because Christianity is now deemed extremist by the state. All over the West, scores of Christian preachers are being intimidated by the police and jailed for preaching the word of God in public. All over the West, Christians are gradually coming to be seen as odd at best, worthy of mockery and disdain, but even worse now, they're coming to be seen as dangerous and malevolent bigots, worthy of persecution and imprisonment. People in the West tend to downplay this comparatively low-level persecution. They say things like, "Oh yeah, but it's not really persecution compared to what people in other countries are going through. We shouldn't really complain. We don't even really know the meaning of the word persecution. People overseas are being hacked to death. Not being allowed to pray at school is nothing compared to that." In one sense, they are right. Being sued for your faith isn't quite the same thing as being shot for it. But it is wrong to say that Christians shouldn't feel upset or concerned about this creeping disdain that is coming in. Notice that when Jesus talked about persecution, he did it by presenting it as something that would happen gradually. He said, "Then you'll be persecuted and arrested and killed. You'll be hated all over the world because you're my followers." So persecuted and arrested and killed. So persecution is quite a vague thing, and theoretically it can be quite a low-level thing, like a whispering campaign or something like that. But obviously being arrested is a step up from that. It means that you've become an enemy of the state. And then finally, obviously being killed is a step up from that again. So what Jesus is saying is that persecution doesn't come in all at once. It grows slowly. The thin end of the wedge will eventually lead to the thick end if something isn't done about it. When Emperor Nero persecuted Christians 2,000 years ago, it began with low-level stuff. At first it was only confiscating property, only intimidation, only vandalization of their homes, only blaming them for society's ills. But over time it grew to arrest and then death in Colosseum shows. When the Nazis persecuted the Jews, it began with low-level stuff. There was only a whispering campaign, there was only a boycott of Jewish businesses, there was only verbal abuse, there was only forcing them to wear a Star of David, but gradually it grew into arrests and then of course being put to death in concentration camps. Persecution rarely comes in all at once. So just because Christians in the West are now only losing their jobs, only losing their children, only being intimidated by the police, only having their businesses ruined, only having their Bible studies banned, we're still right to speak up about that right now while we have the chance. What we accept today becomes the baseline from which more sinister persecution will grow tomorrow. The same spirit of disgust that now mocks Christians as weird, out of touch, intolerant, bigoted, old-fashioned, or whatever else will one day, if left unchecked, be the same spirit that calls for their arrest and deaths in the future. When Jesus said, "Then you'll be persecuted and arrested and killed, you'll be hated all over the world because you're my followers," this is all coming true. Satan knows that his time is shortening, and his desperation and fury against Jesus' followers grows by the day. 80% of religious persecution is now perpetrated against Christians. We are persecuted in 3/4 of the earth, and even in the best places, our freedoms are now clearly diminishing. Jesus said this would happen, and it has.